Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Catherine.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves. Hello and welcome to Mission Imperfect. Now today we have a juicy one. This could take hours. The topic this week is boundaries. And Catherine, I know this is one that you came up with. So tell us what you mean by boundaries.
Absolutely. So just to be clear, we're talking about personal boundaries here rather than, your boundary fence or your cliff edge or something like that. But
It's not about hedges, yes.
No. That'd be a bizarre episode, wouldn't it? And yes, and we promise we won't go on for hours. But like most things, there are sort of connections with other topics like people pleasing and decision making. But let's just start off by saying what we mean by having personal boundaries. And really we're talking about personally appropriate limitations or rules for our own physical and emotional well-being. Now, I appreciate that's quite a mouthful. I'm not suggesting you need to have some kind of rule book that you carry around with you because,
Although
gosh, that could get, well, you could, but that could get very long-winded, very heavy, and every different situation you encounter, you have to add a new rule. I mean,
just a
I
minute.
don't even know how you'd start on this one, but basically we're talking about some principles, I guess, that allow us to keep a level of comfort in relation to our interactions with others and situations that we may encounter, because we're going to encounter things that are difficult or awkward or uncomfortable. So it's about how do I guess, sort of maintain and preserve things in a way that feel as comfortable as possible, and I do mean as possible for me in that situation. So it's an interesting concept, and I guess it leads on to a question: well, so should these things be fixed? Should they be completely immovable? Should they be flexible, or even exist in all circumstances? So what I thought I might be helpful is to just sort of set out some different areas in which we may want to think about these sort of limitations or rules that we might want to have things in place. And I don't necessarily mean sort of like hard and fast rules, but like I said, some sort of guiding principles. So if I just say what the areas are first, and then we'll talk about them a little bit in turn. So the first one that probably feels relatively obvious would be physical contact. The second one would be, the verbal interactions with people. Third one is about personal space. And the fourth one, which was quite an interesting one, but actually a very valuable one, I think, is time, because it is such a valuable resource that we have. So those kind of struck me as the four areas. There's probably more, but when we're talking about personal boundaries, those are the four areas in which we might want to consider what are my kind of limits, expectations, or what I think is reasonable. So does that make sense, Kirsty? Do you think
It
this is
does.
starting?
Yeah, I like that way of breaking it down. I'd say, I mean, certainly in the sort of the world of personal growth and self-help, whatever I like to call it, there's a lot of talk around boundaries, isn't there? And I sometimes find it feels a bit overwhelming, a bit big about it. I don't know where to start. Do I just plant a hedge? What?
Well, exactly. If someone
So
said to you
breaking
now,
it down like that is
if
really
someone said, "What
helpful.
are your boundaries?" You'd be like, "Well, hang on a minute."
Yeah.
It's really difficult just to sort of say it. Well, I don't know, but to me, it certainly would be very difficult to say off the top of my head, these are my boundaries, because it's all situation dependent, person dependent, the relationship we have, and scenarios. That's why I think having some kind of rule book that you put together is going to be quite difficult. But if you think, even within, so let's go through them one by one. So if we start with physical contact, it's, about what are you comfortable with whom, in what situation and what circumstances. And of course, this is going to vary. You've got, your close family members versus people that you've just met. So your boundaries of physical contact are likely to be very different, aren't they? I mean, there's some people, they meet you and they hug you straight away, don't they? And yet there are others who that would be a way to forward a contact, wouldn't it? But with your family, I guess you're going to have a different boundary level, and
Yeah.
we're certainly saying that it's okay for it to be adaptable to those different sort of situations. But I think just having an awareness of, and when you meet someone else for the first time, I'm always conscious that I'm relatively comfortable hugging people, but if I've just met someone for the first time, they may not want that as much as us,
It can be a difficult one, can't it? Knowing
yeah, it
how to
can.
manage that. But if you are aware of, I think perhaps being aware of your boundaries and what feels okay for you probably helps you tune in a little bit more to other people and to maybe not cock it up as much.
Yeah. And you can sort of take a lead, can't you, from other people? Or if you know straight away, well, I'm not a hugger, first time hugger, you can sort of lead the way by, offering your arm or something, making it clear that you're still wanting to
Yeah.
greet
A
somebody,
handshake or a
but
little
just
wave. Yeah.
away from like behind a table or something.
Yes. When you're running in the opposite direction, it's a bit of a clue. Uh,
Yeah, so I just realised if you stood behind a table, you've literally put a physical barrier in the way, haven't you? We were joking about fences and hedges and stuff at the start. I was, I,
yeah.
I've written a blog about boundaries, and the first thing I came up with, because I immediately thought of the boundary fence in Jurassic Park. And I thought, literally a physical, and yet look how ineffective that was, because they broke it
Yeah.
down, didn't they? So it's probably not the best example to use anyway.
Yes, don't use a fence if you've got dinosaurs around. That would
Yeah,
probably be a good principle to work on.
yeah. So yeah, we can put that as number 5 on the list.
Number 5, dinosaurs.
So
Right.
yeah, exactly. So second one was verbal interactions, and of course, this is where we'll have so many of these in a day, won't we? Where we may not have quite so many physical interactions in this world where we have, here we are talking via a screen, so no
We have
physical
Zoom.
interaction, but we have our verbal interaction. Is so how we relate to others, how we wish to be spoken to in return, and what becomes unacceptable in terms of perhaps language, tone, volume. And again, this will be situation dependent, relationship dependent. And when you think about your work interactions versus your home interactions, that they are going to be different according to those relationships. But equally, it doesn't mean that you'll not have some understanding of what you think is reasonable. And again, it's both about what you are putting out, but also are willing to and want to receive in return.
Yes. Yeah, that's such an important point. And boundaries work both ways. It's not just about what you're willing to accept, and it's about what you are willing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the third one, personal space. So this is interesting. People might think, well, what's the difference between this and physical contact? Because you might be thinking about your own personal space. So again, it
Hmm.
made me think of being wedged on the London Underground in someone's armpits, which is always
And there
deeply
isn't personal
uncomfortable.
space on London transport. Yeah.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen, does it? Um, but we're actually not just talking about upon your person. We're talking about perhaps, certain possessions or certain spaces, like like your bedroom, for example, a very personal space, things that you might have. And what are your expectations of others in relation to these? And you had a really interesting point to add on to this, didn't you, Kirsty?
What came up for me with this was around linked to that is that the sort of a sense of emotional space
Yeah.
of kind of needing time without people. I was going to say in your face, not in a physical way,
Yeah.
but I'm finding this quite hard to put into words. But maybe it comes down to the introversion extroversion thing that we talked about recently. Some people need to have a little bit more distance from others, and recognizing that can be important. And around the level of, and these can be negative words, and I don't mean them negatively, but around the level of sort of clinginess or neediness that can exist
Mm,
between you and other
mm.
people, and what's acceptable there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, and this could be in a romantic relationship, a family relationship, a friendship. It could be in all
Mm.
those different
Yeah.
settings. Yeah, I think actually that's a really good add-on to the personal space, like emotional space, because it's about, yeah, a sense of what do I need, perhaps just on my own. Very much connected to what you say about maybe a bit of the introversion extroversion conversation that we had before. You know, some people like to be the life and soul in the middle of the room. You know, the personal space thing perhaps isn't so important as to someone who's more comfortable in their own company and not having someone literally clinging onto them the whole time. Which leads us very nicely onto that fourth one, which was time. So how much of it can you, or are you willing to give freely to others? And what do you allow for yourself? I'm such a big fan of this. Like what time do you carve out for yourself, as well as your
Mm.
commitments, obligations? I'm not saying they don't exist, because of course they do,
Yes.
and the must-dos that we have. So I think time is a really interesting one to think about your boundaries around time. I mean, some people are very literal about this, aren't they? Like they do tasks with a timer. So it's like, I'm
Mm.
going to write my content or whatever it might be, and I've got 20 minutes to do it. I don't quite operate like that, but I have to say maybe I should give it a try. I think maybe it'll give me some time back, because they say your task will expand to fill the time you allow, don't they?
Yeah.
So if I've got a whole day, I call it a danger day, because I will fill up the whole day with one thing.
That really shouldn't have taken that long when you look back on it. Yeah. Is it the Pomodoro technique where you set a timer
Yeah,
for 20 minutes or something, but then you allow
yeah,
yourself a break for 5 or 10 minutes and repeat? It's the idea that that allows you to focus better. If you try and say, well, I'm going to concentrate for a full hour, the chances are you won't.
yeah,
But 20 minutes you can manage, and then you allow yourself the distraction, then you go back in.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, time is such a big thing for people, having the time to do everything that they need and want to do. And so important to have a boundary around how you're using your time and what you allow to happen with it.
yeah, absolutely. And I know people might be thinking, okay, that's all well and good. I can see how having some boundaries in these areas might be helpful, but how do I set them? How do I communicate them? And how do I keep them and in a sort of healthy state? And I think there are some questions that you can
Oh.
ask yourself to help do this. And we'll put these in the show notes, as well as those four areas, so you can perhaps go back and refer to this. And I think it's about identifying it in whatever situation it might be, relationship, circumstance. Where is there this kind of line? So we've joked about fences and hedges and whatnot, but you could almost picture a sort of a virtual one, if you like. And at what point does this interaction, whatever it might be, relationship, start to feel like it's crossing that line? In which case, it might be any of the following. At what point is it starting to feel uncomfortable, perhaps persistently so?
Hmm.
Perhaps it just doesn't feel right anymore. Perhaps it doesn't feel worth it anymore. Like there isn't enough in it for me. Like perhaps it feels like it's one way
Hmm.
traffic. So, sort of in summary, it's basically sort of going against your values. So it will start to feel out of line. We're gonna have to talk about values, aren't we, Kirsty, another time,
Oh,
to be really
I
clear what we mean about
definitely.
this. But I think that's
Excellent
probably a
topic.
whole other
Yeah.
episode. But I think people understand what we mean. And sometimes this can happen gradually. It can happen sort of stealthily, sneakily, and then it doesn't become obvious to us. That's what I call it stealth Met, because things creep up in a way rather than
Yes.
becoming obvious. You don't suddenly wake up to someone different who you the day before, but perhaps gradually over time things have shifted. And again, it's not necessarily about blame. Just going back to something we've spoken about before with acceptance, things have perhaps changed and moved on. You have also perhaps changed as well.
Hmm.
And it just isn't. So, this is perhaps using an example of a relationship. This hasn't felt like it's comfortable, right, worth it, perhaps enough
Yeah.
in it for you anymore. And
You
that
can
could be an
make sort of
example of where a boundary is being reached.
Yeah, I think maybe you can make lots of little compromises. Say, okay, not too comfy with that, but it's minor. I can deal with that. And the things go until suddenly it's a big. Actually, no, just no. All the little things
Yeah.
I felt I could deal with at the time, but it amounts to something bigger. I like that idea of the stealth mare.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you feel like this is potentially is what's happening, like you've reached a boundary, you're approaching one, maybe it's been crossed, you can then decide what to do about it. And it doesn't mean you have to wade into a conversation wielding the word, "You crossed my boundary." That's probably not like everyday language that people use. So you may not even use the word boundary at all, but you can choose whether to talk to somebody about it, whether you state what your position is, what you are comfortable with, what's acceptable, what you wouldn't like to see a repeat of or something to continue. You can make a choice about, is there a way to recover this situation, whatever it might be,
Yeah,
or is this possibly a point where you part ways, or something shifts. And I love what you put in here, Kirsty, about property. I think this was a great way to explain this.
but yeah, I mean that this idea of talking to people about the fact that you feel your boundaries have been crossed, even if you don't use that language. People don't know necessarily that they are trespassing on somebody's property if there are no fences or signs to tell them that.
Mm,
And all too often, linking back to what we were just saying around that whole gradual build up of a bad feeling, it's incremental. People start doing things and we don't tell them that it doesn't feel quite right because it feels so minor. And they've no idea that they are actually starting to cross lines for us.
yeah, yeah. I think
And
we think people should infer what's acceptable, and maybe
yeah,
they don't, because their personality might be completely different
their
to
boundaries are
yours.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, people aren't mind readers. I think we do forget that a lot. That you should know this. It's like, well, actually, should I? I mean, yes, I suppose there is a general level of acceptable behavior. Like shouting your head off at people generally is viewed as not really conducive behavior
Generally.
to a
Yeah.
good relationship, is it? But at the same time, there's a whole load of subtleties and nuances outside of that. But maybe we think, well, that was unacceptable. They slighted me, or whatever it might be. But in their mind, either they didn't even notice it, or it was on their scale of acceptability so minor that it wouldn't register for them, whereas
Yeah.
it clearly did for you. So we
It's
can't leave people guessing, I suppose, can we?
we I mean, in LP, there's this idea that although we are all occupying the same space, we have very different maps of it. And
Mm,
your map is not the same as somebody else's. And when you and yeah, I think our kind of our natural instinct is to assume that everybody else is experiencing the world in the same way that we are, because it's very hard to imagine a different experience. You can't somebody who's never seen color, you can't explain green, and it just is. And
yeah.
that's kind of how we tend to view our experience of the world subconsciously, isn't it? Well, surely everybody experiences it like this.
Yeah, yeah. We forget people will see things differently to us, don't we? Just like,
Yeah.
surely that's totally logical. It should be how I see it.
If it upsets me, it must upset everybody, and but maybe not. And those questions you posed, I think it's brilliant, because what I realized when you're going through that is that because we use the phrase boundaries, you do think of things like hedges and walls and fences and very, very permanent set things. But what those questions brought up for me is that your boundary can be very, lost the word, shifting. It it isn't always in the same place. So on a
Yeah,
day that you feel very tired and run down and overwhelmed or whatever, what feels acceptable to you, what you can cope with, what you're willing to do with, is going to be very different
yeah.
to a day
It's
when you
situation
are
dependent,
full of
isn't it?
energy and ready to go. And it
Mm,
and that makes the communication really important, doesn't it? Because if
yeah.
one day it's, oh, I want to hug everybody, I'm full of the joys, and the next is, do not touch me. It's both are okay, but people need to, if you're not communicating that and willing to be open about it, then people are going to get it wrong.
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely see in that situation how that could be confusing for people. So that is, you're absolutely right. That's where the communication comes up. But yeah, absolutely. It's not, we're not saying have, you've got to put that fence post in with concrete, therefore it can't budge. It's just, it's more likely to be flexible. But I would say having some understanding of what they are is important, because if the alternative is no boundaries,
Mm.
I think this is where there is slightly dangerous territory on the other side of having those boundaries, and that's people pleasing land, as I've called it.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, and this is where I think you can allow your desire to be seen favorably in others' eyes will just override your boundaries. So even if you've not articulated them, um, but that sense of what you find comfortable, right, worth it, enough in it for you, or in line with your values, that's got overridden because of the sense of pleasing others. Or it may not be as strong as that. I've also got, to accompany people pleasing land, I've got I wish I wasn't here land. It's just like slightly subtle difference, but it's just like it's just an undesirable place to be, because it's not the right place for you, because you have allowed what inside to feel acceptable and right and worth it and all those things
Yeah.
to be compromised, and perhaps compromised a step too far. So we're not saying that having boundaries means you trample all over other people's feelings.
No, no, of course not.
If far from it, but there's hopefully some kind of area that is acceptable and that you can communicate. And I think that was the key part. And it doesn't push you to something too far from what's reasonable in your eyes, and in other people's eyes as well. So if we're talking about, relationships and interactions with others, we have to be mindful of what other people's boundaries are. And this leads us on to, is it possible to have them and use them all the time? Because you think about all the different situations you might have them. We have employment, at home, you're in a
Mm.
romantic relationships. And this is why I think it's worth just having in mind, sort of got these guiding principles to keep you in overall check and on the right track. And they'll be different for all of us individually. And we can see how much flexibility might be required, or that we are prepared to give. And I think that's a really important point. It's about what you are prepared to give way on, as well, as much as anything. And it can
Yeah.
just give you an overall sense, and then you can work with them and sort of adjust them as you see fit. I think that's a better place to be in, rather than to have none at all. And I'm not somebody I don't have this, if someone said to me, so what are your boundaries? Like I said, I wouldn't really be able to answer that question, but I do know in my mind what I have as sort of things that I find acceptable and things that I don't, even if I haven't, written them down, laminated them, or anything like that. And I think I can apply those principles in the situations that I am encountering. I hope that makes sense. I think it's something that
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
do have in mind, even though it's not perhaps
Yeah.
concreted in.
We're going to have to do something on values because, as you said towards the start, knowing your values and being able to recognize when a situation is not in alignment with your values is probably one of the most straightforward ways of maintaining a boundary. And again, that those questions about your feeling at any particular point, we are all allowed to feel safe, uncomfortable. That's where everybody should be. And if you, rare occasion when should is a good word, that's where everybody should be. And if you're not, if you don't take steps to preserve that, to recognize when it's that sense of being safe and comfortable is being breached, then that's going to become a problem. So very often, exactly as you said, rather than a laminated set of rules, it can be, it's more about an awareness of how you feel and whether things are in alignment with your values and how they're making you feel at any given time, and whether that is acceptable.
Yeah. I call it you can check in with what I call the body barometer, because I think that the body's a big giveaway of how we might be feeling in a situation. And sometimes it's like when we're nervous, you might get sweaty palms, for example, and that might just be like a normal reaction. But you can get definite cues, I think, from your body about what is
Oh, yeah.
bordering on this is, your heart might start racing. You get the jitters, that sort of it's like your body is tuning into a sort of flight
Tightness
or
in
fight.
the
But yeah,
belly or
it's sort of
whatever. And
thinking,
yeah, the shoulders go
what
up,
is it?
clenches.
Yeah, 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 yeah. The shoulders go up, definitely. The
Mm.
jaw gets all tense. I think those are big indicators of, oh, hang on, then are we approaching something that's crossing a boundary for me? And therefore I can choose perhaps to remove myself from this situation, or challenge it. And I know that's not always easy to do. I think it's certainly something I found a little bit easier as I've got older. I don't know if it's I think people talk about when you get over
Yeah.
40, you stop caring quite so much about what other people think. So you're more likely to speak your mind.
I think
Um,
there's something
but
in
before
that.
that,
Yeah.
that's almost infringing on my question for this week. But so we'll
Oh,
we'll pause there
back
for a
off from that.
moment, and we must do that. I think there are some brilliant quotes on boundaries, so I'd love to share a few of those with you. And I think the first one, good old Brené Brown, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others.
Oh, yeah.
She's got such a way with words, hasn't she? She just puts it so, I mean, that would have taken me about 6 sentences to make roughly the same point, but she's got it there brilliantly just in that one sentence.
And what actually something that brings up for me is around one area where we tend to be extremely good at setting some pretty firm boundaries, which is in sort of recognizing our own worthiness and potential, and
Yeah,
that idea that and having the courage to love ourselves and allow ourselves to move those boundaries outwards a little is a really nice
yeah,
one. And okay, this is something that I hear quite a lot, and I'm going to admit I still struggle with it, but I do find it quite inspiring. And it's from Anna Lamont, and it's no is a complete sentence.
it's so powerful, isn't it? I
Yeah,
I still find it really awkward to just say no,
no.
just and say nothing else. I almost, but it's not that I feel like you necessarily have to justify it, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is a complete sentence, but we do have a tendency to say no because, and no, and then offer the explanation as to why. But do we always have to? Interesting. Um, how do you feel about that, Kirsty? Do you feel comfortable just saying no?
Very rarely, but keeping it, what I find that keeping it in mind reduces the amount of explaining I do.
Mm,
I I think I always offer some sort of explanation, but they're getting briefer and more to the
yeah,
point. And it's more likely to be no plus explanation rather than yes, because I won't say no.
that's true. Better to be a no and a reason rather than yes when you really wanted it to be a no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm probably more likely to be in that. I just think sometimes, other than do you want a bowl of ice cream? No, that's I think that's okay. But something a bit more. I know
Why would you say no?
well, okay.
Well,
If
you
you said
lost me then.
biscuits, I would have said yes. Ice cream I can pass on. I'm not so mad on all the dairy. There we go. Oh, sorry if I shocked you
Oh,
there, Ghost.
I think I might have had a boundary crossed there. Anyway,
Okay, well, at least we've
moving on.
identified we are definitely different people. Anyway, we slightly digress onto food as we often do, but let's get back on track. I love this one. Apparently it's not been attributed to somebody. I'm sure someone would love to take credit for this one. And it's you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Isn't
Oh,
that brilliant? Because
yes.
that real sense of sacrificing yourself, talking about that people pleasing land to keep others warm. It's such a powerful phrase, isn't it?
Isn't it? It's a great metaphor. And I mean, we talked about selflessness at one point, and that sums it up beautifully.
Mm. And I'll just
The,
finish on this one. I love this one. Givers need to set limits because takers rarely do.
oh,
Isn't that putting things? Yeah. So if there are no boundaries, do people just continue to take and push and push and take. And it may be that because they not doing it totally selfishly, if you know what I mean. If they think if this feels acceptable to me, I imagine it does to you, I will just keep going. Whereas it could have
Yes.
been way beyond for you without somebody realizing. Equally, it could have been done in more, devious ways, like, oh, I seem to be getting away with this, so I'll keep going.
Yes, for some people it'd be manipulative, but for others it would be, well, this person is expressing, pleasure and enjoyment in doing this. I'll keep asking them. They seem to like to feel needed, and it can just be a straightforward misunderstanding and a lack of communication. It doesn't always
Mm.
have to be sinister, does it? But do you have a question for us to
I
finish with?
certainly do. And so it's not really, I'm afraid it's a multi-part question this week. I've been a
Oh,
bit cheeky and stuck a few in, but I do think it's quite an interesting topic to think about. And so my question is, what's your relationship with personal boundaries? So, and some slight add-ons to this. So, for example, do you think they are clear? Are they flexible or static? Are they communicated or are they often crossed? So you can just sort of add on a few extra thoughts about how you feel about boundaries. And I think for me, as I mentioned before, it's not like I don't really have them clearly articulated either to myself or to others explicitly. But I think I definitely do have a strong sense of what I think is okay and what is not. And then I will either choose to remove myself from that situation or
mm,
challenge it if I feel able to. Situation dependent, obviously. And as I said, I think I'm more comfortable speaking up now as I've got older. I don't know if that's an age thing, wisdom thing. I don't know what it is necessarily. They're just getting over 40 and just perspective has slightly shifted. Um, but I just don't have time. I just think I don't have the inclination all the time for like politics and cliques and bullshit, basically. I just don't have the time or inclination for it. So I will not get myself embroiled in that kind of stuff. So that for me is quite a firm boundary. I'm just not interested.
sounds very sensible and quite
Thank you.
liberating.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely is. So, don't get involved in the drama if you don't need to. I don't think.
Again, that's the word boundaries. It sort of suggests containment, doesn't it? Whereas in actual fact, it's more of a liberation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Kirsty?
Fairly similar, actually. I don't think I have much in the way of clearly defined boundaries, and they definitely vary based on the context and also on the people involved and my understanding of them. It can be a bit of a mutual thing, can't it? So I'm not much of a natural hugger, but I have friends who are, and that's okay, and I can deal with that. But if it's a stranger, I'm a lot less likely to do it. Find it uncomfortable, and yeah, actually trying to, if you're introduced to a stranger, holding out a hand or doing a silent wave or making sure you've got something in your hands at the time so that the hug is not an option. It can be a nice way of setting a little boundary if you really don't want to do it. But I think that in getting to understand and trust myself more and becoming more aware of my values, I think that's helped me to become a lot better at recognizing where my boundaries are. Because sometimes it's not setting them as such as it is recognizing them. And
Mm.
those questions that you asked earlier in the episode, for me, that they sum that up really well. When if you can ask yourself those questions, and the answers are going to tell you whether you're at your boundary or not, and then and that's when I know what to do. That something has to change. That I have to make a choice
Yeah.
about whether this is, depending on the people and the situation, whether I am prepared to carry on in this way in this particular context, or whether I need to remove myself to change it.
Yeah. So hopefully that's given you all a lot to think about in terms of your relationship with personal boundaries. And we will put the areas and those questions in the show notes so you can have a little think about that. But hopefully we've explained why we think actually, ironically, having boundaries is more freeing than it might sound. Um, even though it sounds like it's a restrictive thing, actually, I think it's about being in alignment with how you want to have your life, and that's actually a lot more freeing than going along with things that are just not comfortable and not right. And that can be the danger when you don't have boundaries in place. So hopefully that has given you all something to think about, and we will see you all soon for another episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.